We have Joseph Ditton here today, and Thomas might actually know Joseph.
Yeah, we happen to be brothers, so.
Yeah, we lived in the same house for a long time, so.
Definitely a little nepotism going on here, so. But it'll be good.
But we wouldn't have him on if we didn't think Joseph was not living just an incredible lifestyle. And we are very excited today to talk with him about his journey, what he's doing now, what he has done, and a little bit about himself. It is a little nepotism, but it's because we have these two incredible brothers here. You know, we went over Thomas. We talked about Thomas earlier. So Joseph, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Joseph Ditton. So I grew up in Logan, Utah, with Thomas, and kind of like went through high school. I had no idea what I was doing and what I wanted to do. And right now I'm a professor up at Utah State University here in Cache Valley. 28 years old, so I turned 29 here this month. So I definitely feel like I'm doing some things that not a lot of people my age are doing. So I went on a mission for the church to Los Angeles for a few years, and met a lot of really poor people. Like there's not another way to say it, I guess. And quickly decided I was like, I don't want to live this kind of lifestyle, or this sort of make ends meet day-to-day lifestyle. And that experience sort of led to the decisions that I made to end up here. So I've got 6 years now as a software developer, experience as a software engineer, just writing code. And when the position up here at the university opened up, I had connections up here, and they were like, hey, you should apply for this position. I was like, okay, why not? So I did, and they gave me the job, and so here I am, college professor, 28, pursuing a PhD, and that's probably what I'll be doing for the foreseeable future.
So that's like the overall of what you're doing, and so tell us a little bit more about the nitty-gritty. So you went on a mission, mm-hmm. and we'll probably talk, there's people that talk on How You Built This by Guy Raz. He always talks about LDS missions and how they're a good stepping stone for your life. Did you feel like that was a pretty good stepping stone?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of forced me to grow up really quick. I lived with my parents basically, and was basically coasting as slow as I could. Probably had a minor video game addiction. I wasn't really going a lot of places, and but I wanted to go on a mission, and I went, and I was kind of all of a sudden they train you for 10 weeks and they dump you out in the middle of nowhere with someone else who has just as little experience as you do, and you have to survive basically, as well as do the job that they've given you to do out there. So it's definitely a 0 to 100 kind of situation pretty quick, and
probably like a professor at 28.
It sort of has felt like that over the course of the last year, that's for sure. But yeah, learning good skills, how to talk to people, how to work with other people, and just general discipline. Obviously, are important skills in any field that you choose to go into. So it can be beneficial. It's definitely beneficial in that regard. So.
Okay, so before your mission, you originally were coming to Utah State to major in music.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that kind of build up to why you wanted to do that, and then how you kind of took that 180 and got to computer science.
Yeah, sure thing. So pretty much the only skill that I was good at growing up was guitar, and so going into music seemed sort of like a natural progression from high school. And I actually did study music up here at Utah State for one semester. I did one semester of classes, and I really enjoyed it and had a ton of fun, mm-hmm. And had every intention of pursuing that further after I returned from my mission. But then, like I said, met a lot of really poor people, and not that you can't be successful as a musician, but we met a lot of people just in that one semester. So we had some famous, I guess relatively famous musicians come and talk to us, and we got to ask them questions about their lifestyle and about how they got to where they were. And a lot of them had stories like yeah, and then, after I got out of rehab and I met my third wife, and we had to sell our home because I wasn't making any money, and I finally went here, met this guy, and made it big, but working 18 hours a day, lost my third wife, and
you're probably working late because you're doing gigs.
Yeah, and it's just like, the music is fun, but being a musician wasn't sounding as fun anymore, right? And so that was kind of the first sort of big red flag that was like, maybe this isn't what I wanted to do. And then like I said, I went to LA, met a lot of really poor people, and was just like, all of it was coming together. I was like, music is not where I want to go. And not to dissuade anybody from listening that's thinking of pursuing a music career. You can most certainly be successful in music, but it takes a lot of effort, and you have to make a lot of sacrifices, and those were sacrifices that I wasn't willing to make, so right. Or didn't want to make even. So
okay, so you get home and you got a pretty cool job pretty quick after getting home, with pretty much zero experience or background in computer software. You didn't know how to code, you didn't know any of that. So tell us about how your first job in that field, like where did that come from? How did you get to even being able to get that job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started back school again after I got home from my mission, and I had some idea that I wanted to do computer science. I'd met a few people that were computer scientists, and they were living the kind of life that I wanted to live. And I was working at a place here in town called Conservice, just answering phone calls, a call center basically, and doing customer support. And took one or two classes, so I had a tiny bit. I had enough experience to say that I had written at least a tiny bit of computer code, but not very much, and most certainly not anywhere near what any employer is looking for. But the thing about computer science, and really even a lot of fields right now, not just computer science, is that a lot of people are realizing that it's easier to train people when they're fresh than it is after they have a lot of experience, because at least in computer science there's thousands of different, or an infinite number of different combinations of tools and work strategies and software development, design patterns. I mean, there's an infinite number of these, and so there's no way that you're ever going to get someone with experience that has exactly the footprint that you're looking for. And so I met the CEO of the company I was working for. I had very little experience. I just walked into his office and said, "Hey, I know you run a software development company here. I'm a student at ESU, and I would really love some experience. Will you give me a job?" And he was like, I don't know if maybe he was shocked that someone walked into his office or scared that someone walked into his office. But he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take a chance." And he gave me a job just as an independent contractor, so I wasn't technically his employee. I was my own employee working for him, and it's a pretty low risk way to try someone out. You have to set up benefits or any of that stuff, but they gave me my first task. My first task was writing technical documentation. It was like the most boring thing in the world. So after I'd written like almost 200 pages of technical documentation for this software that they had been working on, I finally was like, okay, like I've done this and I've done this really well. Can I write some code? Like, I'd really love to write some code. And they were like, sure, why not? So they gave me this project. It was kind of a throwaway project. Like, it was like a maintenance project. And they were like, we have a few things we need fixed on it. And so it just kind of started small, and they gave me smaller things. They started to trust me more and more and more, and eventually I became sort of one of the top engineers at the company. Even before I graduated, and I sort of became an expert in some things that no one else there was an expert at, and that made me valuable. So.
Okay, I think that's a very important point to talk about. We look at the success now. You're a 28-year-old college professor, but that looks good on paper, but people forget about the work that has to go in behind the scenes. Kind of life lesson right there is go take what you want. To go into his office, like that's something that very few people would do, I think. So yeah. For people listening, that's kind of the stepping stone for success, is being able to do what other people don't want to do, if you want to get to where other people aren't. So, that's something really cool, I think, that people can apply in their lives, being able to, how do I get from point A to point B? It's like, well, you have to do what other people aren't doing and take the jump. So,
yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of a shame that that's sort of the dominant attitude. it's like I'd never get a job like that because I don't know the right people. It's like, well, I didn't know the right people either. I just walked into a random guy's office and asked him for a job. And you really have nothing to lose by doing something like that, right? I guess, the 10 minutes it takes you to walk into his office, if he says no, then you're out 10 minutes. But, I mean, really, you have nothing to lose by going in and asking someone for a job or even just asking someone for advice, right? Even if you just walked into a company and said, hey, I want to work at some place like this, tell me about what you do, so that I can prepare to do this. Like, this is what I want to do, and I want to take the right steps to get here, right? Those things are, like, they sound scary because you have to put yourself out there, but, like, they're absolutely zero cost actions to do. So if more people did that, it would be, I think, not just in my industry, but lots of industries would be much better off. I mean, think about how much talent is out there, people who are talented at things that are just too scared to walk into someone's office, I mean, the next great inventor, the next big innovation could come from really anybody, right? Some random person, and because they're too scared to walk into someone's office, that innovation never happens. So
right, we were kind of talking about that the other day. Starting this podcast, when we sat down and recorded like our first little sound clip, it was probably pretty dumb, but we're like, we just took the step that 99% of people with an idea don't do. So you're right. I think a lot of industries would be better off. There'd be more, like, the workforce would be stronger if people would kind of just go grab life by the horns and take it. So
yeah, absolutely.
But okay, so you're a college professor now.
Well, can I back up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I wanted to ask. So you were like, give me a piece of code to do. How did you know how to do that code?
Well, I probably shouldn't tell my boss this. I had no idea how to do it. I mean,
you went from technical writing, which I understand as you're basically just editing manuals, right?
Essentially, right. I was writing the user's manual essentially for this software, which
you're like, let me code.
Yeah,
those are very different.
Very, very, very different. And honestly, most jobs allow you to learn on the job and encourage it and expect it. But you can only, like, as an employer, you can only allow a certain amount of learning. At some point in time, someone has to know what they're doing. And being as inexperienced as I was, I kind of gave myself a time bar. So I said, okay, I've got this task. I'm gonna give myself 3 hours of on the clock to figure it out. And if I haven't figured it out how to do it after 3 hours, then I'm gonna clock out. I'm gonna go to lunch. And kind of spend some of my own time on it. And I spent a lot of time outside of work researching things. If I ended the day on a problem that I couldn't solve, I went home and figured it out in the code, right? Okay. In the code, at least in engineering and computer science, anyways. Sort of the good engineers from great engineers is that there is that learning is a lifestyle, not a job task, right? Mm-hmm. So you realize that learning how to do something correctly is not only beneficial to your company, it's beneficial to you also, right? Because you become more valuable as you learn. And so it's worth spending time, even though you may not be getting paid to do that, to learn a skill. It's the whole reason we go to college. Like, very few people get paid to go to college. We go to college and spend a lot of time and money learning skills because we know it makes us more valuable. It's the same when you get on the job. That doesn't change after you graduate from college. You need to continue to learn and continue to improve your skills, because once you plateau, you stop being valuable. The industry, any industry, is moving forward, and if you're not moving forward with the industry, then your value decreases, and it's really hard to live the lifestyle you want to live if you are not making the money that you need to make to live that lifestyle. So
yeah, because all of a sudden you're teaching yourself this code, you're growing. Are you getting more projects? Are they starting to, like, throw more at you? And they're saying, man, he's, like, pretty impressive as a coder. Or did it take some time?
It definitely took some time, though. Like, it's really hard. Like, this doesn't happen with everybody, like, at least in computer science. But it does happen to a lot of people. Like, I'm definitely not unique in this aspect of getting a job early and learning quickly. But maybe it's still not kind of what will happen to everybody. I mean, we had a lot of people that we hired, and after a month they weren't making meaningful contributions, And so we let them go, right? And whether that's a knowledge thing or a discipline thing, that's really hard to say. That's I wasn't in sort of a position to observe those types of things with some of these people. But for whatever reason, they weren't learning as fast, and so they had to go. But it did start out just kind of small stuff, so it was like, fix this little issue, and I went and I'd write 15 lines of code, and we'd go through the review process, and I got it all put into the final product, and it was exciting, right? And then it was like the next part was like, okay, now you've got to solve this problem. It's like, okay, this is 1,500 lines of code that are going to need to be written to solve this problem. And pretty soon it was like, hey, you've got this whole project you're going to be working on, and that's going to be 15,000 lines of code probably to finish this project. And then as the project started to get bigger and bigger, you stop looking at it in terms of sort of lines of code or hours of work, and it's like, okay, this project we're going to be working on for the next year and a half.
No way.
And 6 of you are going to be building this thing over the course of the next year and a half, and that's a lot of responsibility, right? And so the decisions you make early on in that process greatly affect the outcome a year and a half down the road, and the success of the project depends on the quality of the decisions that are made early on. And so it's definitely would be abnormal for someone to go from writing technical documentation to that kind of project where their decisions can affect if the company survives or not, right? Like that would be a very poor business management practice to kind of throw someone in like that. But you definitely want to find a company that's willing to let you go through that. Okay, you're going to write documentation, you're going to solve small problems and slowly solve bigger problems until they can say, yeah, here's this big project, you're in charge, whatever you decide goes, right? And it's really cool. And once you reach that phase, that's where your value shoots way up, and you can tell your boss, it's like, hey, I've got a lot more responsibility now. I want to make a lot more money, and there's not a boss on the planet that would not be okay with that. So.
Okay, so I want to back up to something you said. You talked about how the company would bring on some people, test them out, and then for whatever reason, after a month or two, they were let go. And you said that at that point in time, you weren't in a position to observe if that was due to lack of discipline, lack of knowledge, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Now that you're a teacher, you get that more intimate view into some of your students. Break down the difference between discipline and like natural knowledge on things. Like how does one go from, okay, I know nothing about this, to then, okay, I can take on a 1.5 year long project with a team and be successful? Because I'm guessing you see a lot of that in your class where they all start with zero background knowledge, mm-hmm. and then naturally some people excel and some people kind of get left in the weeds. So to kind of break that down from a teacher's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So and it is, I do get to see very sort of intimately student efforts, and so that I am glad that I'm kind of in this position now that I can make these sort of judgments on why people are failing and succeeding, and it's kind of cool. But I think if I were to give it a ratio of like knowledge to discipline, I'd say it's like 85% discipline and 15% knowledge. Like if you again, speaking sort of computer science, it would be hard to say for any other discipline, but in computer science, yeah, I mean, knowledge comes with practice, and practice requires discipline. It's not like a sport where sort of your genetics sort of define, at least in some way, whether you can be good at the sport or not, right?
Right. You can't learn to be 7 feet tall.
Right. You can't learn to be 7 feet tall. You can't learn to be 600 pounds of muscle or whatever, right? That's those sort of they're sort of those who are more predisposed to doing some things like sports or but with computer science it's not, and many other technical disciplines that's just not the case, right? Anybody can learn how to do it, but because there's very little sort of natural talent involved, everybody has to overcome the same sort of discipline spike that it takes, and where I teach mostly introductory students, most of them have not overcome that discipline spike yet. So they're all smart. I don't think I've ever encountered a student that I was like, this kid really just is not going to be able to do it, you know. And I've only been teaching for a year, but I've had, you know, hundreds of students over the course of that time already, and there've not been a single one where I'm like, this is not for you, right? Discipline-wise, though, had a lot of students that you know, they can't figure out how to turn things in on time, or they're not willing to reach out for help when they're stuck. Things like that do take discipline and sort of take getting out of your comfort zone. And a lot of them haven't figured out yet. Some of them have, and they do really, really well. And I try hard to reward that. In fact, some of my students I've reached out to and said, hey, like, I still have connections at that company I was working for. I said, hey, you are doing really, really well. You could really benefit by going and getting a job, and I have some connections. If I put in a good word for you, would you apply at this company? And they'd be like, yeah, obviously I will do that, right? Discipline is the main factor, the main thing that I think keeps people from succeeding. And then as you get into some really technical stuff, then knowledge comes into play a little bit more. But like most companies out there aren't doing really, really technical things, you know. Like, and when I say technical, I'm talking about things like, you know, guiding, you know, spaceships to Mars and self-driving cars. You know, like most tech out there is not so highly specialized that you need a lot of very, very specific knowledge to do it. You just need practice, and practice is discipline. So
going back to your story, I think that was a great question. And going back to your story, you're getting more responsibility. Your company's putting more on you, and then did you seek out the professorship, or did someone come to you? Because you're doing these projects that take years.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you'd asked me a year ago if I wanted to be a professor, I'd have been like, no way. Why would I want to be a professor? But my professional experience is actually building educational software. So I had already had a bunch of connections at not just Utah State University, but universities all over the world.
Because they're using your software.
Because they're using the software that we build. So I worked a lot with, mostly in a sort of a support capacity with a lot of these universities. You know, if they were using our software and they had a problem, like that would get forwarded to me and be like, okay, let's see if we can figure out why this is happening and fix it in the software so that they don't have this problem anymore. But I met a lot of people at different universities, and I knew a lot of people at Utah State. I was also pursuing a master's degree sort of at the same time as doing all of this here at Utah State. So I knew almost all of the professors, the faculty and the staff up here. And when the position opened up for a professorship, I heard about it through one of my colleagues up here. He said, hey, there's a position up here that's opening up for an assistant professional practice professor, and you should apply. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll think about it. Anyways, thought about it a little more, and you kind of take stock on sort of your lifestyle, and you go, what if, you know, would this new job help me live more of the lifestyle I want to live, or is it not, right? So like, you can find a job you can find a new job that pays you twice as much, but maybe that doesn't live the kind of lifestyle you want to live, right? Like, I could probably make just as much money being like a trucker, you know, but I don't want to leave my family for 4 weeks at a time, right? So it's like, money is not necessarily the factor when deciding when
the lifestyle you wanted to live.
The lifestyle I wanted to live. It was the, you know, the environment and you know, the family, the work-life balance, those kind of things are important. And obviously money is important too. You know, if you want to have a boat or you want to drive a nice car, you got to make money so that you can do those kind of things, right? But when looking at the benefits and everything, I was like, wow, I'd be an absolute moron to pass up this opportunity, right? It's like, I enjoyed teaching, like I enjoyed being in the education space already, so I knew it was something that I would probably that I would enjoy doing. I actually had got lucky and had the opportunity to teach just one class up here one semester before they hired me, just because I knew everybody up here.
At 27?
I was 27. Yeah,
26?
27. And just they were like,
teaching a class full of other 27-year-olds.
Yeah, it was a little weird. Kind of a funny story. I showed up for the first day of that class, and we're all standing outside the room just as a group, and they're all talking about like, does anybody even know who this professor is? Like, they're just all talking around like about the professor. They had no idea that I was a professor because I'm just sitting there with my backpack.
You probably have a backpack.
Yeah.
You're like, he's a real jerk.
It's really hard.
Fortunately, nobody said anything like that about me, but it was kind of funny walking in, and they're all sitting in chairs, and I go up to the desk and start setting up, and they're all looking a little confused. Yeah, who's this kid up here, teaching us? But I got really lucky to teach one class, just because they had one of the guy that they probably would have hired to stay on and teach at least this one class had something come up in his work life, and they ended up having to like move to Texas, and so he wasn't going to be able to teach the class anymore. And so like the week before the semester started, they were like, "Oh, we needed someone to teach this class," and so they reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to teach a class? You have a week to get ready." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" So it kind of sounded like a fun challenge. But so I had already taught one class when the job opened up, and so I knew it was something that I would enjoy doing because I'd done it once, right? Just went through this absolute ridiculous application process. We fill out 20 forms and have like 10 interviews, and they gave me the job, and so I was 28, and I mean the benefits and the everything are outstanding. Like I don't know why more people don't want to become professors. Let me just say that. I mean, you work...
Well, because I don't know if most people know how to become a professor. Honestly, like if I were to go right now, I don't think majority of people know how to do that.
Yeah, and that's and it's kind of funny because I didn't think I knew either, but it turns out it's just like any other job. They have a job listing online, and you send in a resume, basically. So it's not so different from any other job. It is different at a lot of universities because you do have to have, at the very least, a master's degree in whatever field you decide you want to teach in. But it's not strictly a requirement that you have a master's degree. So,
do you have your master's?
I do have a master's degree. So it's if you don't have a master's degree and you want to be a professor, well, I think the easy option is, well, go get a master's degree or go get a PhD. I say that nonchalantly, like it's something that's easy to do.
Take 7 years and go get a PhD.
Right, but if that's the lifestyle you want to live, and I can tell you sort of a little bit more about it. Like,
tell us about the lifestyle, because you've alluded, but let's hear what makes it so appealing.
Yeah, so you get paid all 12 months like with every other job, but you only work essentially 9 months of the year, so the school year, so starting in essentially end of August, and then we end first week of May. And then pretty much any time between the first week of May and the end of August, you kind of do whatever you want. But you're still getting paid, right? So you're getting paid, and it's a decent salary, at least here at Utah State is, and most universities are pretty competitive with salary. So in Utah State's unique because it's a state school, and through Utah's Right to Know, you can get on actually look and see what people make up here. So if you're ever curious about what to expect to make as a professor, you can just go look at all the salaries of the professors up here at Utah State through Utah's Right to Know. Because we're all state employees technically.
Right.
But so you teach 9 months of the year, and that the day-to-day work is I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's not like super physically demanding, so you're not like on your feet necessarily all day. So what I do is I teach 3, sometimes 4 classes, but I'll get paid extra for the 4th class. And so for my 3 classes that are part of my normal salary, so essentially I'm in the classroom for 9 hours a week, essentially. And then the rest of my time, I'm preparing lessons.
Having TAs do everything.
Yeah, I do have my TAs. I do have my TAs do a lot. But
you're preparing lessons.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm preparing lessons. I'm recording videos, so I'm preparing like some classes to move to online classes. So I'm doing that kind of stuff, right? So it's fairly low stress work for the most part. So from a work perspective, it's very it's very organized. It's very there's a lot of routine involved. So you're not showing up to work going, okay, where am I driving today, or what kind of crazy construction project am I working on? Those kind of things. And even in the software industry, that's probably the most stressful part. Is you I mean, there are new problems that you're solving every day that no one else on the planet has potentially ever solved. And so you come to work and you're like, I don't know how to do anything that I'm about to do today.
And there's no Google Forms for that. There's no Reddit articles.
Not a lot of times anyways. So, but teaching, there's a lot of established sort of practice and procedure. The university runs things like clockwork here, so I never have to worry about where I'm going or what I'm doing at any point in time. So the day-to-day is a little stress, and then you get almost 4 months of vacation every year, because you get summer and then you usually get a month around Christmas between semesters, and it's like this is my first summer, and I'm going, well, let's see how many vacations we could go on this summer, because like I'm getting paid to do all of it, right? I'm still getting paid over the summer, and I just so like last week we were down in St. George and Escalante. We hiked some of the slot canyons down there. We're going to California here in a few weeks.
If you've never seen the slot canyons in southern Utah, we'll post some pictures and stuff to our Instagram page. It's one of those things that, like, no matter where you're at in the world, you definitely want to see before you die, because it's an amazing experience. So.
Yeah, slot canyons are fantastic, and we had a lot of fun. We did it with we took our 10-month-old, and I've got some fun pictures of, because like there's points in the slot canyon where, I mean, it's like 8 to 10 inches wide is all. So I mean, you're sucking your gut in and squeezing your shoulders past, and I've got my baby over my head. Squeezing her through the slot canyons, because we did fit. I'm trying not to like scrape her knees or her face on the rocks up there, and man, we had a ton of fun down there. And these are all things that I've always wanted to do with my family, and it would have been hard to do without this professorship job. So
with your regular 9 to 5.
Yeah, with the regular 9 to 5. I mean, I essentially went from having 10 days of vacation every year to having like more than 10 weeks of vacation every year, right? So it's almost 20 weeks of vacation every year, and it's it's a lifestyle that's hard to beat, and so like I think there are people out there who kind of look at that and go, that's well, I could never do that, and I think that's kind of unfortunate, that sort of that I could never mentality is, because, well, professor isn't necessarily the magic bullet to solving all my problems. It was, sort of just consistent choices of always making sure that I was sacrificing things in the right areas to do the things that I wanted in other areas that I think is kind of what's made it work for me. So
one thing, we've talked about this before growing up and even over the last year, and we've kind of touched on the money versus lifestyle argument. You have the opportunity, and you still could if you ever wanted to, move down to the Silicon Slopes in Salt Lake City, start one of these tech startups, make a ton of money, but obviously that would jeopardize, certain things of your lifestyle. So, for people looking for those kind of opportunities, seeking out, how can I find this lifestyle? Elaborate a little more on where you talked about, making sure you're making sacrifices in the right area, because people think, there's this maybe illusion that you can have, a huge salary, a ton of time off, a ton of freedom, a lot of liberty in all these areas. Well, that's probably not necessarily the case. So tell us a little bit about what you mean by making sure you're making sacrifices in the right areas.
Yeah.
And maybe how you're actually doing that. You alluded to a little bit of it, but kind of elaborate a little on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the reality is, well, there may be people out there that do have, they make an infinite amount of money and they can do whatever the heck they want. That's just not the reality for pretty much everybody else, right? And it's not my reality either, or the reality of anybody that I know, or anybody that they know for that matter. But so it's kind of there's a balance obviously between time and money. You can make a lot more money, but then you'll have a lot less time to do the things that you want to do. Or you can have a lot more time and not make very much money. So it's like if you just don't work, then you don't have any money, but you have a lot of time to do stuff.
Right.
But then there's also a balance of, well, the things that you want to do during the time, oftentimes take money. One of my hobbies is guitar, and
which we have right here.
I have a little guitar,
and we hope that you play some for us.
I might, maybe I'll if I can find a pick or something, maybe I'll play something for you. But guitar's kind of an expensive hobby. Like a good guitar will cost you $1,000. A good amp will cost you $500 to $1,000. Any software you want to use will cost you a couple $100. And you got cables. It's an expensive hobby, right? And so to do that the right way, you have to make some money. But kind of talking about these sacrifices. So I think an easy one for me is I spend as little money as I can on things like my transportation and my housing. So things like that are not as important to me as doing things like spending time with my family, going on vacations, my music hobby, and my other hobbies, my other tech hobbies. Or making sure that my wife is sort of reaching her goals and things like that that are all more important to me than driving a nice car. And like I own a home here in the valley, but it's not like it was the bare minimum that we could afford, basically, right? So we probably could have bought a house that was worth twice as much money as the house that we bought, but I'd had to sacrifice in other areas, right? I wouldn't have been able to keep up my guitar hobby, and I probably wouldn't have been able to drive any car for that one time. I'd have been taking the bus, and I'd had to work more. I'd had to take maybe a second job, and those are things that are all possible. And that lifestyle may sound appealing to people, and that's totally fine. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But my lifestyle, like any kind of like unnecessary expense, like don't speed, don't pay speeding tickets, like all that kind of stuff. Like just stop doing that. It's like the 4 seconds faster you're going to get home is not worth a $120 speeding ticket, because $120 speeding ticket is $120 you can't spend doing whatever it is you want to do, right? So it's just this balance. So you sacrifice in some areas so that you can do things in other arears. I think. And
tell us a little bit about some of the hobbies that you do, because you're sort of a hobbyist, I would call it.
Yeah, so I've some geckos and stuff, and I got chickens that we take care of, and dogs and cats. Right, so we got a whole zoo at our house that we take care of. I also kind of dove into blacksmithing just this last year and had a lot of fun with that. I'm still actually doing a little bit of that, not as much as I kind of was when I got into it. All sorts of stuff.
Were you inspired by Forged in Fire?
And it was kind of funny, but Forged in Fire was kind of an inspiration for that, and that's a lot of fun.
What have you made?
I've actually made a couple of knives out of just found a place online, bought some steel and some wood, and hammered a knife together, and it's ugly as sin, but it'll cut.
You made it.
It'll cut stuff if you push hard enough on it. So
you could make a computer knife.
Yeah, a computer knife.
Like there's enough metal in a computer. Could you
probably make a knife out of a computer? Probably. There's a lot of carbon and stuff in a computer. You can make a knife out of computer parts. That's funny.
Okay. So we're kind of winding down on time here. So I just kind of want to recap a little bit what we talked about today. I think this was a very constructive conversation, not just for us, but hopefully for people listening. But the big takeaway that I took away, and maybe I'll let you share your thoughts here in a sec, is just to be intentional about what you want to do with your life. Joseph has found a way to balance income and time in a way that is very beneficial to his life. He could have more time if he took another job. He could have more money if he took another job, but he's kind of struck that balance. Being assertive in what you want to go get was a big theme for me on this, whether that's with getting your first coding job, getting your professor job, or even like learning how to make a knife, while your wife's in labor. Just figure out what you want to do and attacking it. I think these are principles that are very beneficial to someone looking to elevate their life from where they're at now. So that was a big takeaway for me. I don't know if you had any thoughts, or Joseph, any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say before is that not only I like you're assertive, because you're like, let me get that coding, throw some more responsibility at me, and then you making more money than most people were at that age because you were assertive. You were like, and not just assertive, but you went out and backed up your words with your actions. Like, you'll study at lunch, you'll do what it takes to be able to do that, and you were able to, again, probably make more and be more successful than your peers.
Yeah, and I think to sum up, I mean, not to sound boastful, but I've been, I don't to say lucky isn't the right word. I definitely have had good opportunities come up, but I owned my first home at 25.
Which in the Utah housing market is a feat.
Yeah, a lot of people in my generation may never own a home. And I think part of it is because still they kind of have the attitude like, oh, it's too expensive, or it's too hard, and that's kind of too bad. But
and your wife gets to be a stay-at-home mother.
My wife gets to be a stay-at-home mother. She doesn't work at all. She works a lot. Don't get me wrong. She does a lot of work. She's not employed anywhere, is what I mean by that. She works harder than me, but it's. I think if I were to give sort of any last advice to anybody listening is. Whatever, like, decide what you want to do and do it now. Like, every minute that you wait to start, the cost adds up. Consider this example. This someone that I know is sort of gone through this, and so I'm kind of telling their experience. But like, they took a year off of school so they could work. They're like, I need to save some money because they didn't want to work and go to school at the same time. And that sounds good on paper. You're like, oh yeah, I'll make some money, and I maybe won't have to take out student loans. But let's assume that when you graduate from college, let's assume that's that year you take off, you're going to make $30,000, and then when you graduate from college, you're going to make $50,000. Well, if it takes you a year longer to graduate from college, it essentially costs you $20,000 to take a year off, right? Instead of making $30,000, right? So it's like, do it now, and then you look at things like. If you get a 3% raise every year, now you're making that 3% raise every year a year later. So that's your career. Now you're out, another almost $50,000, and then do it. Like, do it now. Do not wait any longer, because the cost of that adds up significantly. And so go to school, like, get some education. Doesn't have to be a college. Like, go learn meat cutting. Go be a plumber. Go learn welding. Get some sort of skill that's valuable. Because when people have valuable skills, they make more money, and you have to treat them well, right? Because if you need someone that has a valuable skill, you can't treat them like garbage or work them to death, because they won't work for you anymore. And then you need to find someone else that has that valuable skill, right? So get some sort of valuable skill, and that sort of forms the relationship that you need with whoever your employer is, or maybe you become your own employer. To negotiate sort of the terms of your lifestyle, because that's essentially what you're negotiating with your experience, is how you want to live your life for the rest of your life. Anybody can go work construction and work 20-hour days,